Hello and welcome back to My House Book Club, where we talk about a different book or a series and hopefully get encouraged to keep on reading. My name is Maya and today we will take a look at Jane Eyre. So, for those of you who don't know what kind of book Jane Eyre is, it was written by an English writer called Charlotte Bronte and was published in 1847. Its genres are Bildungsroman, Gothic, and romance. The story starts at Jane's childhood, where she is abused and mistreated, and follows her inner fight through different stages and places in life. She ends up being a governess at Thornfield Hall, whose mysterious and dark owner seems to have a secret that he is hiding. I've known about Jane Eyre for a long time. It was recommended to me when I was a young teenager. I think I probably put Jane Eyre in Google search and saw Gothic horror and was immediately like, nope, this is not for me. Turns out Gothic horror is not like horror nowadays. This is my first Gothic horror novel, so I'm not like an expert on what Gothic horror is, but I think in this book it came out more as agonizing and distressing feeling, darkness, mystery, gloominess, and some supernatural elements. I will say I was scared a couple times, like momentarily, but it was not something to be actually scared about, nor a reason to avoid this book. So, if you are a scaredy cat like me, do not worry and please read this book. I want to start off by giving an overall reading experience of this book without spoilers, and then later I want to go into the analysis and details with spoilers. So, this book turns out to be an incredible treasure for its plotting, writing, characters, and themes. I was amazed at how refreshed I felt after reading it. It was like somebody was telling you the most important storyline of their life, and rather than feeling like I finished a book, I felt like I finished a story. I don't know if that sounds odd, but that's how I felt, and I think it's because the plot just flows. The reader gets to witness somebody find their purpose and calling in life, and it was incredible to see somebody who thinks they are weak find their inner strength. I read that a lot of people related to the character of Jane Eyre. In my case, she was exactly like my friend, which is so funny. But the fact that so many people can relate to her is a sign of what a great main character Jane Eyre is. Overall, Jane Eyre was such a beautiful and rewarding reading experience. As a reader, you don't have to wait too long to be rewarded, but then there are twists that suddenly change how you see things, and I'm almost thinking I should have done a vlog instead of a review while reading it, because it was fun to get a hint, you think, oh, it's probably this, and then it turns out to be something else, and I just thoroughly enjoyed that. I highly recommend putting markings, or whatever you call these in English, or keeping a reading journal, because it was fun to go back and see how so many things from the beginning tied up with the endings. I was expecting romance from Jane Eyre, but I got so much more. I'm very impressed by Jane Eyre, to say the least. Okay, so let's get into details. There will be spoilers now. This analysis of mine, it's based on how I related to the book, so I'm sure not everybody sees it like I have. And also I kind of just let my thoughts flow, so I'm not sure how cohesive this analysis is, but I hope the main ideas come through. Also, I will be looking at my notes from time to time, so if you want, feel free to listen to this like a podcast instead of a video. You, do whatever you want. Let's start off with Jane's childhood. I was thinking about how Mrs. Reed treated Jane. I think some of it was actually anger towards her late husband. It's as if Mrs. Reed is punishing her husband for leaving Jane in her care by putting Jane in his old room when she rebels. But mostly I think they were just too different from each other. Sometimes when personalities and values don't match, people can build an image of the other person in their head that is not necessarily true. And I think because of this, Mrs. Reed just had a prejudgment of Jane no matter what she did. As they don't fit together, this already sets a search from the beginning of the story for her to look for her purpose and a place where she belongs. In my opinion, the first time Jane finds her place is with her friendship with Helen Burns. Now, one might say that Bessie was Jane's first friend, but with Helen she has an equal friendship. And I love how Jane shows that this friendship taught her to love and worked as a base for all her future friendships, including Mr. Rochester and St. John. And that's how I hope I say St. John. Like, I hope that's right, how I pronounce it. Anyway, this is what Jane wrote about her and Helen's friendship. Quote unquote, "I never tired of Helen Burns, nor ever ceased to cherish for her a sentiment of attachment as strong, tender, and respectful as any that ever animated my heart." I think one of the main themes in this book is finding one's spiritual/higher calling, and I think it's present from the beginning with Helen Burns, who Jane looks up to. The moments where these callings were found were, in my opinion, the most powerful moments in this book, and I think it wrapped everything else around or under its wings, including the romance. Jane starts off as searching for her freedom, but what she finds through Helen's example is that there is a higher calling in life, and within that freedom, even through hardships. Jane starts off as bitter and angry, and I read some opinions that she learned to control her outbursts, but I saw it more as she found her calling in life, and through that she turned her pain into compassion and forgiveness, and she used the pain she had experienced to see behind flawed persons a person in need of freedom, and that includes herself too. I think this was how she was able to forgive Mrs. Reed. In the beginning of the book, Jane wrote that she couldn't understand why she had to suffer so much, but that years after she finally understood why, meaning that she saw her suffering had a purpose in her life. Jane being able to forgive Mrs. Reed enabled her later in life to forgive the love of her life, Mr. Rochester. But I do think that her pain is probably one of the reasons why she was attracted to Mr. Rochester, or one reason why they had this bond between them, because Mr. Rochester was suffering also. I was a bit worried for her when she started to fall in love. This book is full of intense feelings, but it made me realize or remember that love in real life is also actually quite intense. The way unrequited love is described in this book is exactly how it feels in real life, and this is one of the ways Jane described it. "I had not intended to love him. The reader knows I had wrought hard to extirpate from my soul the germs of love there detected, and now, at the first renewed view of him, they spontaneously arrived green and strong. He made me love him without looking at me." Now, I know there are opinions about Mr. Rochester, whether he was worthy of Jane's love or not. I think in the beginning he isn't. Let me explain that. So, he isn't worthy of it because he's hiding a secret from her that would have destroyed her and would have gone against everything that she believes is right. On the other hand, he hasn't fully faced the fact yet, and thus acts right within his own reality that he tries to justify. I could see that he acknowledges her youthful love and tests it to see whether she is strong and wise enough. And there are many times in this book where he's able to see Jane for who she really is because of this testing. Jane believes she is weak, but he sees that she's actually strong by saying this about her. But to the clear eye and eloquent tongue, to the soul made of fire, and the character that bends but does not break, at once supple and stable, tractable and consistent, I am ever tender and true. Now, how good is that? He also sees her calling. He actually says in the book how Jane's strength is in listening to other people. Their conversations can be difficult and odd at times, which in a way is making the reader want to know more. They analyze each other and see how what they will say will be returned to them. I think the fact that Jane can test Mr. Rochester in their conversations, even though she's supposed to be in a lower position than him, shows that he's not a tyrant. It is interesting to Mr. Rochester that things that would bother a normal person makes Jane more curious about them and gives her courage to be herself. One of my favorite lines in this book is by Jane in a moment where she lets out almost a burst of herself from her heart. And it goes like this: "Thank you, Mr. Rochester, for your great kindness. I am strangely glad to get back again to you, and wherever you are is my home, my only home." For Jane to say that she has found her home means that she's seen, accepted, and loved as she is, and she admits to finding what she has been looking for. Let me tell you, the first time Mr. Rochester called Jane by her first name, I couldn't help but let out a joyful scream. But going forward, when I read about Jane's feelings of uneasiness before her wedding, which is before I knew what was going to happen, I felt so troubled by it. But then I decided to lean into this uneasiness. I stopped resisting it. And oh boy, it fit perfectly and it paid out when the wedding took a turn. And this is my advice to new readers of Jane Eyre. Lean into the gut feelings that this book gives and it will pay out. Before I go into why I think in the end Mr. Rochester was worthy of Jane's love, I need to talk about St. John and the Rivers family. So, quite soon after I met the Rivers family, I thought, interesting that Rivers family also has a brother and two sisters, just like the Reed family. I think this was hint number one, although I didn't get it yet. But this is one of the ways that this book ties the beginnings to the endings. Jane, looking for her place as a child, finds it in her family as an adult. Another way the beginning is tied to the ending is how Helen and St. John are a bit similar, actually. I think in the sense that they both knew what their calling was in life and they lived their lives looking at this goal. I think this was such an important theme in this book because Jane's life could have had ended in two different ways. Either serving God by duty or serving God by showing compassion and forgiveness. St. John's calling can sound forceful or useless. In my opinion, this book was very clear that both callings, either out of duty or compassion, were good and noble. However, the problem was that St. John thought that only calling was under duty and thought that Jane couldn't serve God under the calling of compassion. The thing is, Jane still felt sisterly love towards him because Saint John? Because Saint John saw that she was meant for more. The problem was that he couldn't see that she was meant for something else than him. This is one of his flaws, and Jane being Jane, she's able to see the person behind the flaw. Throughout the book, Jane learned to deny herself wisely, like when she escaped Thornfield Hall. But if she would have denied herself by marrying St. John, she would have denied herself from the higher or spiritual calling that she had. This is why I loved the ending of this book. St. John found his freedom by following his calling, and Jane by showing compassion to Mr. Rochester and herself, and allowing herself to love him. They both got what their hearts had longed for and found freedom within it. So I'm just amazed at how much gloominess turned into light by the end of this book. Now coming back to Mr. Rochester, he always knew that Jane was meant for light by saying this about her while she was still a governess. It was never intended to be compressed in the eternal silence of solitude. It is a mouth which should speak much and smile often and have human affection for its interlocutor. Yes, I had to Google how to pronounce interlocutor, and I'm still not sure if I'm saying it right, but let's let it hang there. All right. The reason why I think Mr. Rochester was worthy of Jane's love in the end of this book is because, one, obviously he's not married anymore, but second, because he humbled himself from his former pride by accepting God's judgment for the wrongs he had done in its entirety, and therefore deserved compassion and forgiveness, fulfilling Jane's calling. Now, I'm not saying that Jane's only purpose in life was to love him, but I'm saying that this was one of the ways that she was fulfilling her calling, and perhaps a path through which she was able to find it for herself. What great light and warmth as Mr. Rochester holds his son in his arms and prays his heart full of thankfulness for the judgment that had passed and he once had defied, but no more. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for giving up your precious time for this little analysis of mine. I know that some people can agree with me because I've read some reviews, but I also know that some people might disagree with me completely. Nonetheless, please let me know what you thought of this book, of this review or analysis, whatever you can call it, and I hope it provoked thoughts in you. Thank you for following my journey as I learn and grow in my reading. I have so many more classics that I'm going to read as a first-time reader, and I'm so excited to share these reviews with you. I also hope you enjoyed the new environment. I might go back to my bedroom, but I feel like this is more proper. But we will see. Let me know how you found it. I'm also sorry that I was looking at my notes constantly, but what can I say? My memory isn't working at the moment. So, if you want to know what I'm reading next, I will be posting it on Instagram tomorrow. So, what else is there left to say than see you at the next adventure? Bye bye! I want to show you my rice cooker that had to move from his place. I think it's a he. He was very offended, but you're back in your place now, okay? It's okay, Maya. You're forgiven. I think I need a dog. Let me know in the comments if you think I should get a dog.